Very glad to have you with us on BBC News. Our main headline this hour. Russia is saying its forces in Syria will suspend all military action in the city of Aleppo for 3 hours each day from Thursday to let some humanitarian aid in. Well, even if that pause in hostilities happens, there is fresh evidence showing the plight of many thousands of civilians trapped in rebel-held areas of eastern Aleppo. 15 of the 35 remaining doctors in the east of the city have written a letter to President Obama asking him to act to stop the bombing and establish a no-fly zone and a safe corridor to districts under siege. Let's speak about that and much more to Samir Attar, an orthopedic surgeon who's worked in Aleppo several times, just returned from there about a month ago. He's in Chicago now. Dr. Attar, I know you didn't sign the letter, but you worked with some of the doctors who did. You've spoken about this remarkable team of people, doctors, nurses and rescue workers, many of them local, just working all the time there to try to save lives.
Yeah, they're local, everyday Syrians who are selflessly and heroically risking their lives, and they've been there for years. They had a chance to leave the city, knowing that they would be besieged, knowing that they might face starvation, but they stayed out of a sense of duty to help the victims. In fact, a couple of them walked in on foot when they learned that Aleppo had been besieged before the Castello road was cut. A couple of doctors walked in on foot under the cover of darkness to get back to the hospitals they worked at. And I just spoke to a doctor today who's one of my closest friends. He's a surgeon. He walked and then drove through a different route to get back into the city, and he brought some tomatoes and potatoes with him to give to the hospital and to give to a local orphanage. So, I mean, it's pretty remarkable. They're heroes in every sense of the word.
And they would have seen the roads closing. They knew they were going to be trapped.
They knew they were going to be trapped, but when you ask them why they stay, they'll say it's their mission, it's their duty. There are so few of them left, and if they leave, who's going to take care of the population? And so that's their attitude. They don't carry weapons. They just are there to save lives, and their attitude is if they die, they will die doing the right thing.
Now, you were there for a while working. I know you've been there before. You're back in Chicago now. You said that you never really leave Aleppo, though.
No, I mean, you never really do leave Aleppo. You meet a remarkable group of people. You work side by side with them. They become like family. You're living in these hospitals. These hospitals they're underground bunkers. They're basements. You hear jets in the sky, helicopters in the sky. There are mortar blasts being lobbed on either side of the line. Those sounds, those sensations are just like cars honking, like birds chirping. It's just background noise. And you're in a hospital where you feel the missiles landing just meters away, and the hospital is shaking, and then you're overrun with patients, and you're seeing very gruesome scenes of just families coming in with their children being just bombed into pieces, and you're trying to save who you can, watching those you can't bleed to death, and it's all just kind of a blur. You live your life one airstrike, one massacre to the next, and then it all ends. You find yourself driving in a car through sniper alleys under airstrikes, and then you cross the border into Turkey, and you get on a plane, and you find yourself waiting in line at a coffee shop, and one person is yelling at the barista for putting too much ice in her tea. Another man is elbowing everyone else to get to the front line, and so you kind of feel like a ghost. It puts a lot in perspective, and yeah, you never really leave. You always think about what's happening back in Aleppo.
And you find yourself on TV trying to explain to people what it's really like. So you're in a hospital which has been so badly hit that you've had to go into a basement. Sometimes I gather you have to close the door because you've got so many patients you can't deal with them all. This must be gut-wrenching. I mean, you are having to decide, presumably, I can save this child, but only if I let that one die.
Well, yeah, those are difficult decisions, even for the most experienced surgeon, but this happens, unfortunately, frequently inside Syria. There was one day a market got attacked, and we did have so many people trying to get through the front door, and there was one bed that had 3 children lying across it, and we had people on the floor, and we actually couldn't fit any more people. There were so many people trying to get through, we just had no place to put them. So those that were outside the hospital either died or they went to another hospital if it was close enough. There was one man on the floor with a hole in his back. He was bleeding to death. He was rushed to surgery. He was carried by the janitor to surgery. There's another man that had an artery in his neck which was bleeding, and he was rushed to surgery. There was a child that had his intestines, unfortunately, the explosion opened his belly, and so his intestines were spilling out. He was rushed to surgery emergently, and there are only 3 operating rooms. So those three got first come, first serve, and all their lives were saved. The child unfortunately died a few days later, and then the remaining ones ended up having surgery done in the hallway. So we did have a case of a child whose right leg was obliterated, and he wasn't breathing, and we were doing CPR on him, and there was a man on the floor next to him that was alive but was breathing, and he was bleeding from an amputated right leg, and we did have to stop doing CPR on the child in order to save the man on the floor, who then went to the hallway of the operating room to have a blood vessel clamped in his thigh to stop the bleeding. And so you make decisions like that. You save one life at the expense of another, and there are times where you feel like you end up seeing more people die than you can actually save when someone comes in with a life-threatening injury. Because you don't have enough hands.
This is tough stuff, of course, for people to deal with on their televisions, but you had to deal with it. We should deal with it as well. Just specifically, you wonder how this can be stopped. You know that these doctors have written this letter to President Obama asking for a no-fly zone, for a safe corridor for humanitarian aid. I mean, quite apart from the suffering you've described, there are, 2 million people without running water, without food. The trouble is, I guess, that deprivation is a weapon of war, isn't it? The point of the siege is to put people under stress, to try to get people to give up, to get that territory back. How is it going to be stopped?
Well, yeah, it's starve or surrender, and I don't have the solution to the war, but I can say that bombing children, bombing hospitals, bombing schools, that's not allowing that to happen. That's not going to end the war. And the mass starvation of hundreds of thousands of people, because that's what's happening right now in eastern Aleppo. There's a population of 300,000 people with no food, no fuel, no medicines, no new doctors coming in to relieve the doctors who are already there and have been exhausted for the past 3 weeks. So allowing that to happen, that's not the answer either. Sitting idly by and allowing a government to bomb and starve its own people, that's not the solution.
Tell us something about the people you were treating. Presumably some of them were soldiers, some of them were prisoners. Were you asking questions? Were you prioritizing, apart from who can I save, who can I not?
No, I mean, when you're a doctor, you're in a hospital. If someone's sick or injured, you just take care of them. That's your job. You're not a judge. You're not making decisions like that. Your job is just to take care of people and save lives and not ask questions. So I took care of some soldiers. I took care of some prisoners that were captured. I didn't know who they were. I didn't ask. I just if they had a broken leg, I'd put it back together. And that's what hospitals are supposed to do. That's what doctors and nurses are supposed to do. And that's part of the Hippocratic Oath.
Just very briefly, our correspondent asked the question in his report whether Aleppo can still be called a city anymore. A city, I guess, is the people as much as the buildings, isn't it? Would you call it a city still?
I would call it a city. I mean, it's the spirit of the people. There are some areas that look like an apocalyptic wasteland full of rubble, where you'll see children climbing 10 feet of rubble to get home. And before the siege, there were areas where there were pockets of life. There were people selling fruits and vegetables. There were people selling meat, and people going about their day to day, because life does have to go on.
Dr. Attar, it's a privilege to talk to you and to hear about your work. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you very much.